Hey, sports fans, Coach Nick here, and I have a special guest on the show today, Seth Rosenthal from Posting and Toasting, the esteemed SB Nation Knicks blog. And we're going to talk a little bit about the Heat versus the Knicks in the playoffs. And Seth, why don't you give us your overview of what this series is going to shape up to be?
I think the Knicks are at their very best right now. I mean, they've really struggled against the Heat this year, but I think most Knicks fans would argue that those were different Knicks teams than the one that's going into the playoffs. So the Knicks have been playing their best ball over the last month, and if ever they had a chance to beat the Heat, I think this would be the time.
Now, is going through all the turmoil of this entire season, are they trying to spin it where it's actually made
I
them
don't know
better?
if anybody's trying to spin it, but I think people have used it as an excuse for the way the Knicks played previously. There was the coaching change, they had a lot of injuries. So there's been a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily contribute to the way they're playing now, but it probably contributes to the fact that they are the seventh seed when it feels like they could be a much higher seed and might be better than some of the teams that are ahead of them in the standings.
And so talk to me about Amare and how he looks
He's
moving
been
on
back for
off
a
the
couple
back.
games. He was smart and played in the Bobcats game when everyone else rested. And he hasn't fit in perfectly. He and Carmelo Anthony still tend to take turns on offense, and I think there will be a lot of lineups where you have Amari but not Tyson Chandler, or Amari but not Carmelo Anthony. But health-wise, he looks fine. He had the bulging disc in his back, but that looks really good now. He's been getting up and dunking on people, grabbing rebounds, playing decent enough defense for him, and falling down, getting back up. So he doesn't look like the Amari that struggled at times with the back issues. Doesn't look like the Amari that struggled through the Celtics series last year. He looks a little rusty, a little out of place at times, but healthy overall.
And like, what kind of key from the Knicks side do you see in terms of being able to beat the Heat? What is going to be the most important thing that the Knicks
The
need to
Knicks
fix?
against the Heat this season have gotten in a lot of trouble committing turnovers. The Knicks are a turnover-prone team, and the Heat are good at forcing turnovers. So that's going to be huge because the Heat, you can't give them easy baskets because they're talented enough that they'll take some tough baskets against you. So any open layups and dunks that they can get are just sort of icing on the cake for them. So it's going to be key for the Knicks to limit turnovers. And then another thing that the Heat don't necessarily excel at, but the Knicks tend to struggle with, is giving up offensive rebounds. So the Knicks need to protect the defensive glass, keep the Heat, again, from getting second opportunities and easy baskets, because the Heat will gobble those opportunities right up, and that's one of the ways that teams tend to punish the Knicks.
Now, just to make it clear, is Melo going to be the
Not
four
in
or
the
is he going
starting
to stay in the
lineup.
lineup?
Amari will start at the four, Chandler at the five, and Melo at the three. But I think, again, we will see a lot of lineups with either Amari at the five and Melo at the four when Chandler's out, or with Stoudemire out, Chandler at the five and Melo at the four, because that worked really nicely. It creates some mismatches, and it gets Melo some really good quality looks off the dribble.
Well, there's no question. I've been saying all along the Heat not only benefit from turnovers and
Yeah.
quick runouts, they rely on them. And as they get into the playoffs against better teams, there was going to be a lot less of those kind of turnovers. But you got to look at the backcourt of the Knicks, and I have to say I would be a little bit concerned
Yeah, I
with.
mean, Baron Davis tends to be turnover prone, and the Knicks don't have much of a floor spreader at the shooting guard position right now. Amon Shumpert's an okay shooter. Landry Field is okay, and J.R. Smith can be a little streaky. The one thing is that the Heat forced a ton of turnovers against the Knicks when Jeremy Lin was starting at point guard, and they did that by blitzing him on the top of the pick and roll and just really harrying his dribbles. And I don't see, Baron Davis tends to commit pass turnovers, but I don't see him giving up his dribble or getting hassled into giving up the ball quite as much as Lin did. So the Knicks will probably get in trouble with turnovers at some point and give up runouts, but um, Davis hopefully can take care of his dribble and not throw the kind of silly passes that he's prone to, and maybe that won't be as much of a problem. But you do worry about the backcourt a little bit because they are shorthanded in that department.
And what's your biggest concern for the Heat?
I mean, those easy baskets are a big thing, and especially the way the last regular season game with the Heat went. The biggest concern is that the Knicks can play great defense and still give up baskets. There are times when Wade is on, when LeBron is on, when it just doesn't really matter. And the Knicks have a bit of that themselves, where guys like Carmelo Anthony and J.R. Smith can get on streaks where it just doesn't matter who's in front of them, that they're going to hit shots. But the Heat have that way of punishing a team for playing good defense, and so that's really what makes them terrifying. But we would take that over easy baskets, I suppose.
And so, also, what do you think about? That's right. I lost my train of thought for a second. Let's see here. We were talking about. Oh yeah, I know the resurgence of the Knicks defense, like you mentioned. What?
Well, a lot of it has to do with Tyson Chandler. Most of it has to do with Tyson Chandler. He just not only does he personally stop a lot of big men, grab a lot of rebounds, contest a lot of penetrating guys off the dribble, but he makes things easier for everybody. Guys feel like they can be aggressive around the perimeter because they know that if somebody beats them off the dribble, they have Chandler there to help out. And to be honest, part of it, especially recently, was that the Knicks were missing Amare Stoudemire. So having him back might hurt the defense a little bit. Hopefully not too much. Hopefully he's inspired by Chandler and sort of blends in with the type of defense the Knicks have been playing. Mm-hmm. But I would say Chandler's a huge part of it. Obviously, Mike Woodson has instilled some sort of, they call it accountability with them. But Carmelo Anthony has been willing to contribute on defense. J.R. Smith has been great. And then the big perimeter defender for them is Iman Shumpert, and he's probably going to get the matchup with Wade. And he's struggled with Wade this season, but he's looked good against Derrick Rose and guys like that. And there's some potential for him to actually put up some lockdown games against the Heat. So it starts with Chandler, but the Knicks have had some good individual defenders around the perimeter and guys who have bought into whatever they're doing defensively.
It's interesting because of all the matchups the Knicks could have had to go against a team that does not have a very good center and does not have a very good point guard, it seems like the Knicks kind of match up because now, Chandler doesn't have to pay attention much to his man, and certainly they don't need to really worry about controlling a high-scoring point guard or a big playmaker. So I have to say, now I don't know if you've seen the breakdowns we've done, but there's been instances where you've seen Melo play defense against LeBron and do pretty well. And on the flip side, when they would ISO, LeBron would usually settle for long shots in a way that, this could be a...
Yeah, I think so. I think, the Melo thing, he always has the potential to play great defense. I think most people agree on that. But he just needs some motivation. And I think playing against LeBron James is one of those things that will keep him motivated throughout the series. And like you said, if they're just going back and forth trading 20-foot jumpers, I think I'm going to take Melo in that battle. If it becomes a one-on-one thing. Mm-hmm. He's been shooting really well. His wrist, his groin, all of his various body parts are healthy enough that his jump shots are going in. So I think that would bode well for the Knicks if he was taking that defensive matchup seriously, and it ended up, in a lot of one-on-one.
I guess the last bit of this question then is, you got Woodson versus Spoelstra. What do you feel about that?
I'm much more familiar with Woodson now than I am with Spoelstra. Spoelstra seems like a really savvy coach who's really good at adapting, at halftime or from game to game. Woodson has been pretty impressive coming out of timeouts, adapting out of, the break and things like that. Spoelstra obviously has a little bit more talent at his disposal, especially up top, but I don't know. Woodson has been here before. He has a ring as an assistant coach, and so I would assume that he has the mettle to battle a younger guy like Spoelstra, and I think it's probably a pretty even coaching matchup, and I feel pretty good about that.
I mean, I have to maybe disagree and say that Spoelstra isn't
Excellent.
the greatest adjuster at halftime. So I think that you might have a chance there. Certainly, Woodson's got a lot of experience. He's not a newbie here. And, I got to tell you, this is going to be a really intriguing series. And you're right. I think that the Knicks probably aren't really a 7th seed. And so I do think that ultimately, and this is my show, so I get to tell you what I think is going to happen, but I say 6 games. And I say those 2 games in New York that they win are going to be raucous and crazy, and Melo's going to be pounding his chest, and it's going to be really fun. And I got to tell you, if it gets to be a 2-2 thing, then that Game 5 comes up, That's going to be a really interesting thing. I have to think that most people will agree that the Heat do have more talent, and ultimately in the first round, I think it might end up helping them, especially with the home court advantage. But I'm going to give the Knicks two.
Yeah,
two
I would
games.
agree with you. Still, I think they'll take at least 2 games, and I would argue that the Knicks have a bigger home court advantage than the Heat do. I think, I don't know what to expect, but I would imagine that in Miami there will be a decent portion of Knicks fans in the crowd, unless they can drown them out. Whereas in New York, it's going to be nuts. It's going to be pretty intimidating for the Heat. Obviously, they're not, they could respond really well to that, but I think, the Knicks will have a bigger home contingent, first of all, and second of all, I think most of the nation is going to be rooting for the Knicks, which the Heat could either seize and work on, or it could really get to them. So the Knicks don't really have anything to lose, and so I don't know. I think it's going to be a closer series than some people expect.
Well, we shall find out. Thank you, Seth, for coming on the show. And don't forget, sports fans, lots more coming up. And definitely check out Posting and Toasting. The link is below.
Thanks very much for having me.
Seth, and we will talk to you soon.